everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from January 22nd, 2021, and I'm recording this on July 23rd, 2021. I always give the date so that you know when this information is actually relevant, because this market moves and changes rather rapidly at times. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 from that week and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. I use both names because I use the 10 that Tom pulls from the list and not Key Collector's full 20 list. Why do we do this? Just to try to see what factors made these books hot back then, how they've been affected by the market since, were they books you just need to be patient on, were they books worth pursuing, so that we all maybe make a little better decisions and we can maybe see some of the patterns in the market. With that, let's get into this week's list. We got 20 books to talk about this week because there were no overlaps, so this might take a minute. So let's get started. First up, we have Abbott, number 1, from 2018, and this hit the list because it was optioned by the Paramount Network. As we all know, this typically means nothing's going to happen for a while. We get this news, it kind of disappears, and that's kind of what's happened here. Back then, it was raw copies were going for 25 plus. Now they're going for 10 to 20. But that's only, I say 10 to 20, but that's literally 2 sales in the last 3 months. And that's because all the listings are for 20 plus, so nobody's paying that. So that's why only 2 of them have sold. So this one's definitely down, definitely a bit of an I'll be back. So that was Abbott, number 1. Next we have Herogasm, number 1. Now this has hit the list a couple of times because in anticipation of The Boys season 3, which I would guess we might get a trailer for pretty soon. I'm not sure when exactly that's coming out, but anyway, this contains the first appearance of Soldier Boy, and we know Jensen Ackles has been cast as Soldier Boy in season 3 of The Boys, so we know this character is coming. Back then, book raw copies were going for 50, 9.8s were going for 450. I predicted a bit of an I'll be back on this one because I thought there might be a lull kind of in the off season, and the book has basically been that a little bit. It's been 25 to 75 is the range for raw copies, although most copies are selling in the 30 to 50 range. 9.8s are going for 2 to 250, significantly down for that 450 that it was going for back then. So this is definitely down a little bit, not a ton for the raw copies, but a little bit, definitely a bit of an I'll be back. Book that a little patience would have saved you at least a few dollars on, and especially on the 9.8s. Next, we have Port of Earth, number 1. Now this is hitting the list for the second week in a row. Last week I talked about it was because there was rumors it was going to be in production, and then it came out, news did come out that Amazon was starting production on this. Still means there's probably going to be a while, but back then it was going for $15 to $30 raw. Now it's $1 to $20 book raw. 9.8s are going for $90 to $140. I will say up until the last couple of weeks, 9.8s were doing 200 plus. So they've started just coming down in the last month or so. So this is another one that's kind of been a down and I'll be back, which is pretty typical for these option properties. You get a little news, and then there's no news for a while. People kind of forget about it. Drops back down. So this is pretty standard stuff. With that, we're going to move into covers. We have 5 covers this week. Is that right? 4 covers this week. Sorry. First up, we have Haha, number 1, the John Gallagher store variant, and just kind of a creepy haha cover with a clown. These kind of creepy covers tend to do pretty well. Back then, raw copies of both the trade dress and virgin version of this were going for $150 plus each. Now they go for $30 to $60 each. So this has dropped way back. This has been definitely a trap. A pair of 9.6s went for $250. There's no 9.8 sales recorded. This looks like maybe a pretty tough book to get in a 9.8, so 9.8 might have a premium. But yeah, this book is definitely dropped back down, and from that 150 plus for individual copies down to 30 to 60. This was definitely turned into a trap. Next, we have Dr. Aphra, number 7, the 1 in 25 Jenny Frison variant. This is one I wish I'd have been able to snag. I did not. And it jumped up to $150 to $175 right off the bat at release. Which is a huge number for a 1 in 25. Even for a Star Wars 1 in 25, that's a huge number. And typically what that means is those books usually hold pretty well if they go that far. This one has dropped back though some. It's basically been 70 to 150, but that's only 3 sales. because everybody's still asking 150 plus. So there's only been 3 sales at all in that $70 to $150 range. There's only been one 9.8 sale. It went for $400. But this one's definitely been an I'll be back, one that's probably worth being patient on. Yeah, people are still asking those big numbers because it is a Frizen, it's a hot artist, hot character, Star Wars, all that goes in why they're asking this. But they're not really getting it. So it'll be worth being a little bit patient on because you can occasionally find a deal as those people have that have gotten it down around $70 or $100. So next we have Star Wars The High Republic #1, the Paulo Villanelli store exclusive, and this is kind of the homage to Clone Wars #1, the first appearance of Ahsoka. Back then, raw copies of this store exclusive were going for $300 to $500 for the Virgin, $200 to $300 for the raw, or for the trade dress, excuse me. Now sets are going for $300 to $800. What that basically means is most of the people that are selling them as sets. And the price is about the same. If you do the math, the price is about the same as what it was back then. 9.8 sets go from $1,200 to $1,600. There are a few individual sales of one or the other. They're going for about half the set price, but most of the sales have been for sets. People are not breaking the sets apart for the most part that bought them. So this is another one. It's been pretty steady. Called it and I'll be back because there have been a few deals scattered in there, but for the most part, it's been very steady on this particular cover for this book. Next, we have Black Cat #2, the Adam Hughes 1 in 50. This jumped up to $70 out the gate as people were wanting it, which is not very much for 1 in 50 when you think about it. It's not even double ratio, which usually means it's going to fall back to ratio or slightly below. And that's what this book did. It's a $40 to $60 book now. So still going for, around ratio. So it hasn't like crashed. It's not that people don't want it, but it is definitely down quite a bit. I do wonder about this one though, because there's only been a few sales in that range, and there's only one currently listed. So is this a potential ghost? We'll see, but which might drive it back up eventually. But right now, it was down, and then I'll be back from those initial sales, and still really only going for around ratio. Next, we have a little bit of, I put it in nostalgia, but it really also maybe was movie stuff. This is G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero #1. At the time, there really wasn't talking about it, but we knew the Snake Eyes movies was coming, and now we know it was a cartoon series. But back then, 9.8s were hitting $1,400, which was a new high. Now a 9.8 goes for around $2,000. Raw copies are going for $280 or so for like mid-grade raw copies. Well, I would say better than mid-grade, like not like near mint, but like very fine kind of raw copies are going at $280 range. So this has been straight cash. It has been a book that has continued to grow. My guess, we'll see how the movie does, how Snake Eyes does did it release today, or is it in a couple weeks? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the date is. I haven't been tracking that very closely, but we got a cartoon show coming as well. So there's going to be quite a bit of G.I. Joe news coming up. So we'll see. My guess is this continues to climb at least a little bit. With that, we're going to move into Sony Spider-Verse kind of movie news, and we got Ultimate Fallout 4. Of course we do. This is the 1 in 25 Djurjevic variant. I have no idea if that's how you say that guy's name. But anyway, first appearance of Miles. And this hit the list back then because a 9.8 went for $14,500 of this 1 in 25, which is just a massive number. I couldn't really find hardly any sales of a 9.8 recently. There were a couple after this that were in that $12,000 to $14,000 range. I could have swore I remember hearing about a $20,000 sale for this book, but I couldn't find any evidence of it. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means I couldn't find the record of it in Go Collect or eBay. I thought it was a heritage sale, but I couldn't find it there or Comic Link. Doesn't mean I didn't miss it, but I could have swore that happened, but maybe not. Maybe 14.5 is still the high watermark. But overall, this book's been very steady. Good luck finding a raw copy of this because they just don't see it. People are sending these in. But I call it steady and straight cash. When it reaches these kind of prices, it's straight cash no matter what. Even if it comes back like $100, or even $1,000 at this point, it's a huge book, and we're definitely worth the money. So with that, we're going to move on to Amazing Spider-Man #361. First appearance of Carnage. We know Carnage, the new Venom 2 is coming with Carnage in it. Back then, 9.8s were hitting $800. Now 9.8s are hitting $900 to $1,100. Raw copies are in that $150 to $300 range. So this one is definitely continued to be a straight cash book. We know the movie's coming. We know symbiotes are super popular both in the comics and now potentially in the movies. So yeah, we'll see. My guess is there's a ton of these, but they are definitely still going for really good value. And my guess is Carnage probably continues to do that. Next, we have the random Sony book this week, Slingers number 0 from 1998. This is the first appearance of Dusk and Ricochet, and I don't even remember who the other two character names are. These were characters that were basically Spider-Man for a time took on alternate identities because they labeled him a criminal as other heroes, and it's funny because they were like super supportive of these heroes. It was, it's Jonah. So anyway, back then there was a rumor of a Dusk movie, which is one of the characters that in this book, and which made no sense because I'm pretty sure Dusk died in this book. Like he didn't even make it through one issue, but that was the rumor. Back then, raw copies were going for $20 to $35. I only call this an I'll Be Back. I don't know why. I should have called this a Come On Man or a Dumpster Fire. Now it's a $1 to $15 book with very few sales. This has definitely been a trap. There's nothing here. I don't get it. None of these characters have really been used since this little run. There's just not much there. Next, we have Venom number 9. So we're doing a little comic buzz here. First appearance of Dylan Brock, if you don't count 7. I never understand which is the first and which is a cameo. But anyway, this is the first full appearance of Dylan. How about we'll go that way? And this is basically the solicitation for Venom 200 came out, which it just got released a few weeks ago. Caused this book to jump to $50. 9.8s were jumping to $220. And that was all based on speculation that Dylan might become the next Venom. Spoilers, that appears to be where the stories went, and yet the book really hasn't moved that much. It's up, it's kind of worth it. It's $50 to $100 now for raw copies. 9.8s are $225 to $325. It hasn't moved as much as I thought it would have from then. It actually had dropped back down a little bit in the meantime, and then when the book finally came out, because it was delayed, it has jumped back up and a little beyond, but not the spike I was necessarily expecting, but definitely still up. With that, we're going to move into, we've got 12 books down, only 8 to go. So we're going to move over to our MCU side of things. And first up, we have Avengers number 52. Of course, this was during WandaVision was coming out, and this is the first appearance of Grim Reaper. Also, Black Panther joins the Avengers, so this was a book that had value anyway. But first appearance of Grim Reaper, and basically there was an Easter egg showing kind of his helmet in the trailer for one of the episodes of WandaVision, which caused this book to jump. Raw copies, according to Tom, are averaging around $300, which seems like a lot, but that's what he said, even though a 9.0 only sold for $350. Seems a little odd, but now raw copies are basically $30 to $150 depending on condition. There was a really, really near mint one that recently went for $300, but it's a complete outlier. Everything else has been $30 to $150 range with really nice copies going for $150. The only sale close in the grade range was a 9.2 recently went for $400. There wasn't any really higher grade sales that went, or any 9.0s that have sold recently. So this is basically, I call this a trap, because didn't think he was actually going to appear, and at $30 to $150 for a $300, if you paid $300, yeah, this has definitely turned into a trap. So he did not appear in the show other than in that Easter egg. Next, we have Captain America number 25. This is the first appearance of Sam Wilson as Cap. So it hit the list, and they were talking about it as being just a bunch of sales in anticipation of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Raw copies were going for 10 to 15, 9.8s were going for 144, and I was like, I did cash or trash, I'm like, buy it, and they're like, well, it's already going for more than that. And I did look, and it was already basically a $20 to $40 book at that point for raw copies, so it had already continued to climb in the couple days from when the list came out to when I actually did my cash or trash show. And now it's a $20 to $60 book. The show has come and went. We see Sam has taken on the suit. We know he's getting his own movie. Now 9.8 though is still only $200 to $300. So I'm a little surprised this book hasn't went higher than this. I know it was higher for a time during the show, but it actually has dropped back down. I know now there's a debate. There's some other book I think people are also talking about as maybe actually the first. There's like an alternate universe or something. Anyway, This book has definitely been up, definitely straight cash from when it initially hit the list. Although it's about the same as what it was within a week of hitting the list. So next we have Nova #1, and this is Kevin Feige mentioned Nova, that he had plans for Nova again, which he's done several times over the years, which caused this book to hit the list again, which it's done several times over the years when he's mentioned it. So this is the first appearance of any Nova character, and this is, of course, Richard Rider, the first Nova in Marvel Comics. And then, so raw copies were going for 200, 9.8 hit 1150. Now raw copies are 50 to 200 again, depending on condition. 9.8s are way up to 2,000 to 2,600, but there's very few of those sales. There's only a few to go with, so the vast majority are those raw copies that are still moving around. So I put this as steady. You could maybe argue and talk me into it, and I'll be back, because you have been able to find some deals on raw copies. If you want to talk about slabs, I think the slab prices have continued to increase, but it seems like most of the sales are those raws. So next, we have the other Nova character that people are specking on, which is Marvel .1, #1, the first appearance of Sam Alexander, who becomes a new Nova. Back then, raw copies were going for 25, 9.8s were doing 250, and it's up a little bit, but still kind of in that same range, 20 to 50 for raw copies, 9.8s 275 to 375. Is this the more likely Nova choice? I don't know. I think probably, but we'll see. Still, this book has not jumped a ton compared to what you think it might for some of the other characters we know are coming to the MCU. So it's still relatively affordable, but definitely up, and has been climbing slowly as people are anticipating which way they might go with Nova. Next, we have Avengers #1 from 2010. And this is very random spec. I guess Jim Comics, who likes to do spec occasionally and talk about things, mentioned this on his show, and he has a bunch of followers. And this is the first appearance of Black Panther's son with Storm, and basically who's from an alternate reality. Anyway, raw copies of this book were going for $10 to $15 with a bunch of sales, because he mentioned it as maybe they go this way instead of Shuri or M'Baku. There's no indication this is going to happen. Storm, for one thing, doesn't technically exist yet in the MCU, although maybe after the Loki show she does. I don't know. She doesn't exist in a world where T'Challa exists. How about that? Yet. So raw copies now are 5 to 15, but that's only based on 3 sales in 3 months. So there hasn't been many sales. So this one's definitely down. It's definitely an I'll be back. Maybe we see something like this, but with what happened to Chadwick Boseman and them saying they're not going to recast, my guess is this is not a character we ever see. And not a spec I would necessarily go after. But with that, still 3 books left, all Star Wars books. We have Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi, Force Storm #1, but this time it is the Flores 1 in 10 variant. And this hit the list based on 1 sale. A 9.8 went for $900. At least I think it was a 9.8. It might have been a raw copy. I'm not sure. The way they talked about it on the show, they said 1 sold for $900. So I'm not sure, but looking at prices, 9.8s had been going close to that before that. So it wasn't a huge spike, but a little bit of a spike to get there from about 6 to 7. I think there was even an $800 sale just before that. So anyway, 9.8 now. There's been only 1 sale recently. That's for $800. This book is a bit of a ghost. There's so few sales. It's hard to really say anything about a pattern. I put it as steady. Who knows? Someone comes up and somebody wants it bad enough, it might go for 15. Or if nobody goes for it, it might go for 3. Just because, it's hard to say when there's so few of these out there. When it's a ghost like this, it's just hard to judge what the market is. Next, we have Star Wars Darth Vader #3, first appearance of Dr. Aphra. This has hit the list a few times. We've talked about this book a bunch. It hit the list several times back in December of 2020, November, December of 2020. Hit the list again in late January, because the 9.8 had gotten all the way up to $500. And basically the book sat there. It sat at $500 pretty much for the last 5 or 6 months. Currently, it's kind of started to creep down a little bit. It's been more in the $425 to $500 range for a 9.8, so just under $500. Raw copies are still going right in the same range they were back then of $1 to $200. I know, because I was looking at them. So this had been a straight cash book for a while. Now it's kind of an I'll be back. pretty steady for a while. I guess now is if you could find a deal. Now would be the time to be looking for a deal on this. Maybe you find a cheaper copy before we get any actual official Dr. Aphra news. At least that's my thought. If you still want this book, you don't have it, now is probably a better time to look for it than has been for a while. Next, we have Star Wars. Our last book is Star Wars #1. This has long been an underrated book. With Star Wars books jumping, this is also in response to Luke appearing in The Mandalorian and people just realizing how cheap this book was, I think. This is, of course, the first appearance of Luke, Leia, Vader, C-3PO, R2-D2, Grand Moff Tarkin. Like, a bunch of characters appear here for the first time. And a 9.8 hit an all-time high back then of $4,500. Now a 9.8 is $6,000 to $9,000. This was a book that was so long undervalued, it has spiked big time. Now raw copies will cost you $150 to $400 based on condition, and a really like near mint one might push around $1,000. But most sales aren't. Most of the copies aren't for sale that are raw aren't that nice, so they don't go for that. Definitely been a straight cash book over the last 6 months. So that's our list for this week. 20 books to talk about. A bunch of MCU, a bunch of Star Wars, a bunch of Sony Spider-Man stuff, some covers. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me this week, and we will catch you next time.